or whatever they say. Oh.
And I always make sure that we're live because I don't trust anything nothing ever works right since we've already had problems where you couldn't hear me.
Oh, we've been there. We've done all the hiccups and the bumps in the road, haven't we?
Technology. Technology is wonderful. Okay, it looks like we're all set and we are technically alive and we are live as well.
Fourth time lucky. This is our fourth one now.
Is this our fourth date?
Fourth one. Can you believe it?
Some relationships don't even last this long.
Yeah. I think we first started doing this 4 years ago. So that's quite a long time.
Are you in you know what? This is the 7th book and I get confused. Are you in the first one, the serial killers book?
First one, second one. We're in the first 3 and then this one, I believe.
Okay, so you've really been along for the ride.
Veteran. I was there from day one, homegrown. Yeah.
Oh, well, for those people who haven't dozed off yet, we're back with Facebook Live, and I'm Mitzi Szereto, as I am every time I'm on Facebook Live. And I'm here today to talk about my most recent book release, The Best New True Crime Stories, Crimes of Famous and Infamous Criminals. And I am joined by celebrity guest, Mr. Joe Turner, coming to us from the UK.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the inaccurate welcome, but yeah, I'll take it.
What do you mean inaccurate?
I'm not a celebrity.
Okay. I thought you were going to say you're not in the UK anymore.
Unfortunately, I'm in the UK, yeah, but I'm not a celebrity. I'm a nobody. That's how I like it. Yeah.
Is it raining? Is it raining?
It is today. It's been really hot for about 3 or 4 days, but today it started raining. So it's, British as usual. So what's it like in Canada?
Well, I'm not quite in Canada, but we are. We seem to have like a bunch of droughts going on and panic, and we're all going to run out of salmon. So I don't know.
Well, priorities. You need your salmon, obviously.
My freezer is stocked with salmon. I'm sick of it already, but whatever.
Why salmon? What's the deal with salmon?
Salmon just seems to be something that lives around in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay, I didn't know. Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you honestly, after all the salmon I've had here, the best salmon I ever had was in Scotland, so I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. See, I thought British Columbia was like hunting grounds, like, people that went hunting for their food, gazelles and
gazelles. No, moose, not gazelles. Moose. I don't think there's any gazelles in Canada.
Dogs, goose, what's the difference here?
Yeah, they go hunting. No, they go hunting for poutine, which is Canada's national dish.
Yeah, I've heard of that. It sounds horrible.
Yeah, it's good in the winter. Let's just, I'm sorry, but I'm not a huge fan.
No,
but we're not here to talk about poutine. We're here to talk about true crime and all kinds of horrible things and I don't know. So you've written a really good story for this book, and I know you were so excited when we were bantering around with some ideas of what to write. I guess you just really gravitated to this case. But your story is called Wrestling with Demons, which is a really appropriate title. And you've written about Chris Benoit, who actually is originally from Canada, from Montreal, if I'm correct, right?
Yep, correct. Yeah.
Well, tell us a bit about Chris.
Chris Benoit. Well, wrestling. You've heard of wrestling. You've probably seen it before. You probably know the people like the big names like John Cena and The Rock and Hulk Hogan and The Undertaker. You probably know those names, even though you're not familiar with pro wrestling at all. Well, I don't know. Are you? Are you familiar with?
I know those names, but I have seen some pro wrestling, and of course, Hulk Hogan is like a legendary figure.
Yeah. Well, the 2 types of wrestlers. Generalizing, guys like Hulk Hogan and The Rock and John Cena were all characters. Like, they gained popularity because they were larger than life, all-American heroes that the kids would gravitate to, They were the kind of heroes you wanted to see win and heroes you wanted to be. Chris Benoit was a different kind of wrestler. He favored physicality more than his character work. Like, he was a very bland kind of character, but he was like this big, jacked up, stocky dude, obvious steroid user, and he kind of added a little bit more legitimacy to the profession, because obviously a lot of people thought wrestling was fake. I mean, it's not fake, it's predetermined. There's a big difference. Like, it's still very physical. You know, you're getting elbows to the face, you can't fake getting elbows to the face. You're really getting elbowed in the face. You know, you can't fall off ladders through tables and not break your spine. That they really are falling off ladders through tables. And Chris Benoit was kind of he sort of pioneered this new style of just hard-hitting technical wrestling. Like, he wasn't a character. He wasn't there for the children. He was there to be the kind of guy that adults wanted to be. You know, he was like the action hero before action heroes were a thing. Well, it's not about the same time. And that was pretty much Chris Benoit in a nutshell. I mean, he was trained in some of the harshest schools in the world, and he got this real sense of discipline. There was an insane sense of discipline. And he brought that to the ring, and he quickly rose through the ranks, and he was in big promotions in Japan, in America. And by the late 90s, he was a focal point of the wrestling industry. He was a fan favorite. He had a cult following. And he went from strength to strength from that point. He was pretty much a made man by the late 90s. But then things started to go a little bit awry, given what he'd done in the past. Yeah,
You mentioned in the story a number of things about the actual incredible punishment that he put his body through. I mean, I fractured a shoulder going to answer my front door and tripping over my flip-flops. I mean, the stuff that he did, I can't even imagine you would have survived this kind of punishing.
I mean, all wrestling training is it's physical. It takes its toll on you. Even just the basic stuff will cripple a mere mortal. But Chris Benoit was raised in the Dungeon, a famous wrestling school in Calgary, and the Japanese dojo system. And there, it's like they put you through the most extensive, vigorous, cruel workouts possible to condition your body to take in pain. It's not a system that's used anymore for good reason, because as we've seen from many wrestlers that have died in their 30s and 40s, it's not a sustainable system. It just puts too much pressure on your body, and by 40, you're either crippled in a wheelchair or dead. They don't do it anymore. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, that was what they did. The masters would put people in real submission holds, keep them in there until they cried and begged for release. They'd make them do endless squats, just working out from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night all day. So it kind of instills, it's like a military boot camp, really, these systems were. And they did work for a lot of people. And most of the people that went through the Dungeon, which was Chris Benoit's system, went on to be very famous wrestlers. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Bret the Hitman Hart or the British Bulldog or Owen Hart or Chris Jericho. They all went through the same system. And they all turned into be very famous, very successful wrestlers, as did Chris Benoit. But given the sense of discipline he had naturally, it wasn't a very good match. He took things too far, even for that system, you know.
Yeah. I mean, as you referenced earlier about the steroid use, which sort of is a precursor to what happened in our particular story. I mean, how prevalent is steroid use amongst these people, and how overkill was he as far as his steroid use?
There was a big, steroids aren't really used now in wrestling at all, especially in WWE, the main, wrestling promotion. Steroids aren't used at all unless they're part-time athletes like John Cena, who aren't subjected to wellness tests, because now there's all sort of regulations in place. Same with the UFC and MMA, can't use steroids. You get tested before matches, before big fights and whatever, and if you're found to be using steroids, you're banned. Back in the 80s and 90s, it wasn't so regulated. Most of the wrestlers were using some kind of drugs, some kind of steroids. And then in the early 90s, it was kind of cut out because there was a big steroid trial, because the head promoter, Vince McMahon, I'm sure you've heard his name before, he was apparently encouraging his wrestlers to use steroids so that they look larger than life, and it became a big scandal. So ever since then, steroids were kind of cut out. But they could still use steroids for medicinal purposes to heal their injuries. So it was kind of like, junkies try and use medical marijuana to say they need it for, getting better. Really, they just want to smoke weed. It was kind of the same with steroids back then. So as long as these steroids were prescribed by a doctor, which is what most of the wrestlers did, they all had doctors in their back pockets that would prescribe them whatever they wanted. That's how they got around the system. So it was still pretty prevalent back into the late 90s, early 2000s. And then around the mid 2000s, 2003, 2004, that's when it stopped completely, apart from the real steroid, the real meatheads, you know, the ones that needed it to maintain their size, otherwise they'd look significantly smaller. Only those were still using it by about 2004, 2005. Chris Benoit was one of them, probably the biggest abuser of all of them, really.
And so Chris, I mean, everything was okay. I mean, obviously he moved from Canada. He was living in sort of greater Atlanta, if I'm correct,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
With his wife, and he had was it one son?
He had one son with his then wife named Daniel, 7-year-old boy named Daniel, but he had 2 children with his ex-wife. But
Okay.
They really stayed away from the scene. They weren't involved or anything. So yeah, it was the only ones involved in his. I don't want to give away the ending, but he's just his last wife and his son with his then wife, Nancy.
So back to the steroid use. Now he started to manifest some odd things going on. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of what? I mean, I know that you had mentioned paranoia and all kinds of other things from the continual.
It apparently started very suddenly. It came on overnight, according to Chris Benoit's friends. He would around mid 2007, he just got very paranoid and very different. He changed to become a different person. He had constant fears that the WWE, the promotion he worked for, were going to fire him. He was really worried that he was going to get sacked, even though the opposite was true. Like, because wrestling is predetermined, and they push the top stars to they can choose who they want to main event WrestleMania and stuff. And Chris Benoit was going to be one of those people. He was about to win the championship, the ECW championship. But for some reason, he was convinced he was going to get sacked and going to leave his family destitute. He started taking multiple routes to his gym. Like he apparently, according to his wife's sister, he memorized 30 different routes to the gym, which was about 5 miles down the road. And he would constantly take different ways every day for some reason. He tried not to leave the house whenever he could. And he was just apparently a very more introspective person during this very brief period for some reason. He would occasionally tell his friends that he loved them, even though he'd never done this for the past 42 years. It would suddenly come out of nowhere. And it was pretty clear to see, according to the people that knew Chris, something was wrong with him. There'd been like a switch had just gone, and he'd changed into someone else, someone that they didn't recognize.
That is weird. I mean, if he was consistently using steroids, so do you think there may have been or there was some evidence of something else that was going on, not just the steroid use, but because the fact that he changed in such a dramatic way in a short period of time is odd.
It's very odd. There's 3 possible reasons. I mean, for 20 plus years, Chris Benoit was taking blunt force trauma to his head. So, he was taking basically damaging his brain beyond repair without him realizing. Because his finishing move was he used to get on the top rope, he used to jump up the top rope, and he used to headbutt the person on the floor. He used to headbutt their shoulder. It looked like he was headbutting their head, but he was headbutting their shoulder. But still, doing that every day, twice a day, is going to take its toll on your brain. And that's one of the prevailing theories why he suddenly went insane, because he was taking the kind of trauma that no one should take right to his skull. And not only that, but when Benoit was in his wrestling matches, I don't know if you've ever seen in wrestling when somebody gets hit with a chair or like a ring bell or something, or an object.
Yeah.
When they get hit, I'll use your book as an example. When they get hit in the chair, they won't take it on the skull, they'll take it with their hands like that. So their hand takes the brunt of the impact and their skull is safe. Benoit didn't really do that. He would just say, crack me on the head with the steel chair, so it looked more legitimate, because he was all about the legitimacy, the authenticity. So he would just take these shots direct to his skull. And back then, they didn't really know how serious concussions were. They knew concussions existed, but they didn't know the extent of what concussions could result in. They didn't know they could make people go mental. And of course, Benoit didn't know this, so he was just taking these shots. Something else that was possibly part of the cocktail that made him go mad. A lot of, as we mentioned, a lot of Benoit's friends passed away in the recent years. Like all of his close friends. So he had a really close friend named Eddie Guerrero. He had a close friend named the Big Boss Man. He died pretty much the same year as Eddie, and they were Chris's closest confidants. And of course, he'd been around the scene for 20 plus years, so he'd had a lot of friends that had passed away and been injured and been crippled. And that apparently he used to write in his diary about how he missed all his dead friends. And that combined with steroid use, combined with blunt force trauma to the head twice a week, that is the prevailing theory of what made him go off the rails or completely change like that.
It's actually, with all this stuff, it's even amazing that he lived as long as he did. Obviously, he's not alive now, but that was sort of, we'll get to that in a bit. But I find it unbelievable too that no one kind of caught on to the fact that, if you're smashing people in the head with a chair, that there's going to be some problem with that, even if it's just like cracking your skull or putting pressure on the brain. It just, how can they have been so naive or so just ignoring this obvious?
I mean, they kind of knew around the late 90s, early 2000s, and they did put protocols in place to protect them, but some wrestlers didn't pay attention, And it was funny because it was Chris Benoit's actions that changed the safety protocols around wrestling completely. Once he did what he did, you'll never see unprotected chair shots in wrestling ever again. You will never see blunt force trauma to the skull on television anyway. You might see it in like the smaller promotions that do it in high school gyms and stuff, but you'll never see it on television anymore. He changed the game for the better, but there was a big sacrifice, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Big sacrifice.
Yeah.
So leading up to the events why this story ended up in a true crime book, set the stage a bit. So what year are we in, and what are the circumstances? What's just going on right now before everything happens?
It's June 21st, 2007. So not that long ago, really.
No.
And I remember it very vividly because I remember reading it the day it happened. It was June 21st, 2007, and it was a Sunday night. And Chris Benoit was meant to be in Texas, but he was in his home in Georgia. And he was meant to be in Texas by like about 6 p.m. because he had a show that night. And that night he was scheduled to win the ECW championship. It was like a secondary championship inside WWE. And he was scheduled to win that championship that night. He got a call from his friend in the afternoon saying, "Chris, where are you? Why aren't you in Texas yet?" This was like about, 3, 4 p.m. Chris replied saying he would be there. So just wait. He was going to get a plane soon and get there. Now, I don't know how long it takes to get from Atlanta to Texas. I imagine it's quite a long time.
Maybe 3 hours.
That's possibly doable if he got on a plane straight away, but it seems like it couldn't be done. But he said he would be there.
Yeah.
Chris never showed up. He no-showed his first ever event in his life. And so WWE had to change the match on the fly and put someone else in the main event and have them lose and whatever. Meanwhile, back in Georgia, Fayetteville, Georgia, Chris Benoit was how do I say? You know what I want to say, but I don't want to give it all away. He was once his son and his wife had went to bed, neither of them woke up again because do you want me to go into detail of it, or?
Well, you could go in. I mean, basically, no. He just again, it's like this switch was flipped in his brain, right? Because it was. I mean, everything was okay earlier, but then.
Yeah, he first went into his wife's office, and he got a cord, and for reasons that no one knows, he just strangled her to death. Just wrapped it around her neck and strangled her to death. And this is kind of bizarre because Chris Benoit's finishing move was, apart from the headbutt, he used to get his opponents on the floor while they were face down, and he would put them in a lock. And he would lock their head and pull their head back and look like it was strangling them. And when the police found Nancy's body, he'd had her in the same position as his finishing move. She's very, I shouldn't laugh. It's not very nice at all. It's a very bizarre thing to do. He had the rope around her neck, strangled her, and then he left her in a study, put a Bible on her body, and then walked out. And about, I think it was 4 hours later, he went downstairs, and then while her dead body was above him, he sat there for about 4 hours. Then, around, I think it was at 4 a.m., he went into this one's difficult for me to talk about, so I won't go into too much detail. He went into his son's room, a 7-year-old Daniel. He plied him full of drugs. He put some drugs down his throat. Daniel passed out, and then Chris did the same to him. He strangled his own son, strangled his own 7-year-old child, left him there, put a Bible next to his body, and then went downstairs. And then he stayed there for a long time while the bodies of his family were in his house. And of course, by this point, Chris had gone too far, and there was only 2 options left for him. He could go on, 3 options. He could go on the run, he could hand himself in, or he could commit suicide. And he chose the third one. He went down to his gym in the basement. He stayed in his house for a few hours first, and he texted his friends, told them he loved them, and then he asked one of his friends to come around and look after the dogs as soon as he had the chance. It's a weird thing to say, weird thing to worry about. He's more concerned about his dogs than his family, which is odd. And then Chris went down to the gym in his basement, and he did something that is so difficult to imagine that I can't believe it's even possible. Like, people have theorized this is not how he died because it's so unfathomable what he did. But he got a weight machine, and he pulled the weight machines that you pull down and then they work your chest. Pulled the weight machine right down to the floor. Was put on about, I don't know, 40 kilos or something on there. Put it right onto the floor. Wrapped a rope around one end, wrapped a noose around the other, and then let it go. And then, of course, he flied back up, and then broke his neck. Basically, he hung himself in his gym. And that was the end of the Chris Benoit story, as tragic as it was.
You know what's interesting about the method of suicide is almost as if he put himself through his own execution.
Yeah.
I mean, back in England, we had the old hangman, which obviously hanging is no longer being used. But it's as if that's what he did. That his own method of executing himself. He took the law into his own hands, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean,
because there's so many ways one could commit suicide. This isn't something that anybody would just do. This is pretty bizarre, pretty remote chance that you would top yourself in this fashion.
Yeah. He could have taken pills. He could have shot himself. He could have drained himself. But instead, he did this elaborate engineering, this weird mechanical approach. And it's kind of like, it's weird because it was like a last act of discipline that he had to do. Like, he was always being very disciplined through his life. This was kind of like a final test for him. It's very strange. Yeah, it's a very poetic ending, I must say. Hanging from a weight machine. I mean, it's just a shame he didn't suffer a bit more because he really deserved to.
Well, that's the whole argument sometimes about the death penalty, that it's too easy, too easy a way out for punishment. When
exactly,
if you've actually got to that point, being on death row, you've obviously done something pretty heinous to get there.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a shame.
Oh dear.
Within a few hours of him committing murder and killing his own family, he was gone too, so he didn't have time to suffer. Which is it a tragedy? Maybe. Who knows? Who's to say?
Well, it seems that, you wonder, could this have all been prevented? I mean, perhaps if there was more knowledge about the kind of damage that these athletes are doing to themselves, or would these guys still just do it anyways because this is, they want to be successful in this, and whatever it takes,
That's one of the big arguments about wrestling now. I mean, there are a lot of people. I mean, the actions they do now are getting worse. I mean, people throw themselves off ladders, through tables, into glass, into thumbtacks and stuff. But even so, they don't go. Head trauma is still. They keep away from it now, because Chris Benoit told everyone that if you do that, you're going to end up insane or dead or crippled. So he did something well, but most people focus the pain on the everything from the neck down now. I mean, is that better? I don't know, but
I can tell you it's not.
Well, I don't know. I'd rather fall in a bed of thumbtacks than have a hammer against my head.
Yeah. I suppose if given a choice, one or the other.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but the thing is that the day that he did all these things and just pretty much destroyed 3 lives in a few hours' time. So there was really nothing to hint of this at all, right? I mean, you said he was on the phone saying, "I'm on my way to Texas. I'm coming. I'll be there." And then the next thing, all this stuff happens. I mean, there was just like nothing, no hints.
The year before, about 3 years before, Nancy and Chris had been involved in a domestic violence dispute, and Nancy tried to divorce him and get a restraining order against him, but then she dropped it within a few months. So I'm guessing it was just, no one really knows for sure, but I'm guessing it was just kind of a domestic dispute that got a bit heated, and then they all calmed down and they got over it. But other than that, there was really no kind of sign that Benoit was in any kind of mental turmoil, really. And it maybe because if Benoit wasn't such a focused performer, that if it was someone else, they might have shown signs that they were trouble. But because Benoit was a very intense individual, very focused individual, he was like the ultimate professional, really. Maybe it's because of that he didn't show any signs. Like that sort of overrid the anguish he was going through. And I should mention this until the end, but it really needs to be mentioned. But when after Benoit died, an institute cut out his brain and examined his brain, and he had the brain of I think he was an 84-year-old dementia patient, and he was 42, I think he was. So he was double his age and had dementia according to his brain, but he wasn't. He was a professional athlete in his 40s. So he was, just imagine walking around life as an 80-something dementia patient. That's how he was living. I mean, it's a miracle he was able to walk or drive or remember anything, but he did somehow. Don't know how. It's a bizarre miracle. It's inhuman.
That's just unbelievable. I mean, just to even conceive of that.
Absolutely. We don't know how he did it, but he somehow managed to live longer than a few days, even as an 80-something dementia patient.
Yeah. So how long? Okay, so the little boy was 7. So how long were he and Nancy married, if you know offhand?
They got married in the early 2000s. So they were married they were together from the late 90s, from like 97. So they were together for 10 years. Married, I can't remember when they got married.
Oh no, that's okay. Just so it was a pretty lengthy relationship.
Yeah, absolutely, very long relationship. Yeah, 10 years. 97, they got married because he met her in WCW, and then 2007. So 10 years in total. Yeah.
Well, that's just and there was some. So other than that domestic violence thing that just sort of blew off, just went away. There was just people didn't notice anything, that maybe there was a problem in the relationship. Maybe he just, I mean, we hear about murder suicides all the time in domestic relationships, which I suppose one could say this is, I don't know, it kind of fits that, but then again, it doesn't really fit.
No signs at all. I mean, only 3 years before he murdered his wife and son, he won the top championship in WWE at WrestleMania, the biggest show. And then Nancy and Daniel came in the ring with him and celebrated. And it's become kind of like an iconic image in the wrestling landscape, because it's a very morbid image. That was 2 or 3 years before, and there was no signs at all that Chris was at all dangerous. He was loved by his peers. He was super respected. You know, when someone dies and their achievements kind of get overblown, like say there's like an average guitar player and then they die, and then someone says, "Oh, he was like the best guitar player," but he wasn't really. But Chris Benoit genuinely was one of the best wrestlers of all time. Like if he was still alive today, he would be in all the Hall of Fames. He would be a revered elite athlete. So he really was one of the best of the best.
The real deal.
Yeah, and right until his last day, he was no signs that anything was wrong with him at all. He was completely focused. He was still fantastic in the ring. And then one day in June 2007, it all came to an abrupt end for reasons we still don't really know why.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going by the the brain being studied and all these other things, it just sounds like he. I mean, but then again, he did have the wherewithal with how he did his killings and this weird thing, this creepy thing about putting a Bible by each body. That totally creeps me out. That's quite thought out.
There's one.
That's not
the other theory.
Plan.
Chris had a friend named Eddie Guerrero that I remembered. You might have heard of Eddie Guerrero. He's a very famous wrestler, a fantastic wrestler. He died in 2005, 2 years before Chris. And Eddie was very religious. He was like a super religious Mexican guy, big into God, Christianity. And during their last few years together, Eddie was kind of trying to convert Chris to Christianity. Chris didn't want to. He wasn't really his kind of thing. But in his last few months, Chris did suddenly become a little bit more religious. And one of the theories that has no basis, there's no proof for it or anything. One of the theories is that Chris wanted to meet Eddie again in the afterlife and take his son and his wife with him. I don't know how much stock is in there. He mentioned something in one of his diaries, Chris Benoit did. But although that has never been released to the public, what he wrote has been released to the public. The information has, but not what he wrote. That's one of the beliefs, or of course it's speculation.
Yeah,
something to think about.
Interesting though.
Yeah.
Well, we've got several stories in the book about people who have, famous people who have done horrendous things, and now we live in a cancel culture. Now, did this also happen with Chris? Was he effectively canceled after this?
He's been completely whitewashed from wrestling history. Absolutely nowhere will mention Chris Benoit's name ever again. It's weird because you'd think his name would slip in at some point, but WWE, the promotion that he worked for, they haven't mentioned his name in, how long has it been? 10, 16 years now. No, absolutely zero mentions at all. All of his achievements have been completely whitewashed. Any footage, he's sometimes in the background of footage and stuff, but they will never call him by name. It's weird because you've heard of the Royal Rumble events. It's a wrestling. It's every January. It's when 30 men get in the ring and they all throw each other over the top rope. Now, Chris Benoit won the Royal Rumble once, and every year when they mention the winners, he's the one that's never mentioned. They'll say, "Oh, 2 people have won the Royal Rumble from the number 1 position. One of them's Shawn Michaels," and they won't mention the other name. it's so bizarre. It's like something's being edited out of life. It's like we've missed 15 seconds of conversation. No, he's been completely gone. Even other wrestling promotions don't mention him either.
Wow.
Yeah, and funny, Chris Benoit's son, the one that's still alive, David, he was at another wrestling show recently on TV. He was at AEW and he's in the front row, and they showed him on camera, but they didn't say who he was because merely mentioning the name Benoit is something that no wrestling promotion will even do anymore, and I understand why. So he's been completely gone. Vince McMahon from WWE, from the chairman, he said that if it hadn't been for John Cena's popularity, I'm sure you've heard of John Cena, famous actor now. He was just in the Barbie movie, I believe. If it wasn't for his popularity at the time, wrestling would have died with Chris Benoit because the backlash from it was insane. I remember very well. There was every major newspaper in the world was covering the hazards of wrestling. And if it hadn't been for John, who had this good guy, all-American kind of character, someone who encouraged the kids to be better and take care of themselves, wrestling would have just gone. So he's lucky we had John Cena, really. He's a hero in ways we didn't know. Because, yeah, Benoit nearly crippled the industry.
Wow, that's really something. I think you referenced too in the story, was it at Nancy's funeral that Chris was obviously not even mentioned there?
Oh, yeah. No one mentioned his name at all. 45 minutes and they didn't mention Chris's name at all, which is great. So it should be. Yeah.
Oh, man. You know, though, I mean, in a way, though, I mean, despite the fact these people may have done horrible things, how can you just erase an entire history of someone who maybe did have some achievements? You know, it's just, I mean, where does it end?
It's a popular subject between wrestling fans. I mean, like Chris Benoit did have some really good matches. And there have been like some wrestlers I know have gone to Vince McMahon and said, "Can I have my match with Chris Benoit on my best of DVD?" Because wrestlers sometimes put out like their 10 best matches on DVD or something. And they've all sometimes asked Vince McMahon if they can include their Benoit match. But Vince has always said, no, absolutely no chance. We are not mentioning his name ever for the rest of eternity.
Wow.
Should he be whitewashed? In some cases, yes. Personally, I think he should. I don't think his achievements in a wrestling ring are more important than what he ended up doing personally. Some people might think differently, but that's up to them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like I said in the book, we've got other people, Rolf Harris and Jimmy Savile, and people who have just done such horrible things. I mean, that I wrote about Ian Watkins from Lost Prophets, and these people are pretty extreme.
Did you hear about Ian the other day? He got stabbed.
Oh God, no! What's he doing?
He got stabbed in prison.
You're kidding?
No, he got stabbed in Wakefield prison. Yeah, brilliant.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
News. Yeah, I don't know who it was. The person who stabbed him has not been revealed, but some prisoners took him hostage in their cell because they wanted something, and then they ended up stabbing him in the stomach.
Oh, excellent. Wow.
It's about time. He's been in their prison about 10 years and he's not had any trouble. It's about time he got a good stabbing of him.
Well, he was saying that they were all kind of picking on him and they wanted him to hide the phone. Where he hid it in an interesting place too, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I met him once. I met him about 20 years ago now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're kidding.
No, I met him in person. He was playing a show and I was there to see him, and he was straightening his hair. And he was in a mood because he didn't have his conditioner with him. That's what he said. And,
bless.
Poor guy. Yeah. First world problems there. Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, Matt, now I have to write a PS to my story that Ian just got stabbed in this.
Stabbed, yes. It was great news. It was all over Twitter.
Yeah, I can't imagine he's super popular with the other lads at the prison.
Apparently, he tries to give guitar lessons to the other inmates. And he tries to act like he's a rock star still in prison. And some people took offense to that and stabbed him.
Wow. Well, I mean, he was having all these young women coming to visit him and holding his hand and acting all, I mean, like when you look at him, I mean, how he looks now, it's just like, are you serious?
It's so weird because he was like I remember every girl at my school fancied Ian Watkins so much. And I'm like, he could have had anyone he wanted. He could have had any woman in the world. And he
didn't want any woman in the world.
And it makes me sick.
Yeah, well, I know as a father, it would make you sick especially, but no, it's just
babies and dogs.
Yeah.
Oh, Christ.
There's just, you just wonder how people get to such a level, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, but that's just a whole other thing. But thank you for the update on Ian there.
You're welcome.
So, well, I mean, back to Chris too. I mean, despite all this, I mean, it's a horrible story. It's a tragedy, no matter how you look at it, and it's a shame. It's a shame that it took something like this to have the industry finally have the light bulb go off and say, I think we need to kind of change things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it should have been noted before. I mean, there'd been incidents before of concussions and stuff, but nothing that had ever been this extreme. So Yeah, it had to be this before something serious happened. But the good thing is it's gone over to other industries now, like the NHL, NFL, NHL, whatever.
NFL.
Yeah, NFL football.
Well, the NHL, the National Hockey League. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they take it just as seriously as wrestling does now. I mean, concussions are a big business, and it was all because of this 2007 incident that kick-started it across the whole sporting spectrum. So it did some good, but yeah, shouldn't have got to this point.
It shouldn't have taken this to have the change. That's the sad part. But then that's life, isn't it? It's always some horrible tragedy that sort of finally changes things for the supposed better. But
yeah, absolutely. Oh well,
yeah.
so it is. Shame.
Well, since in our last few minutes, why don't you? So what do you've got? What do you have cooking right now? I know the last time we spoke, you were you had a book floating around. No.
I did have a book. It is done, and it is in a mixed publication, and it's also got a TV show attached to it. But I'm got to release them at the same time, so can't do one before the other. So
wow! That is exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be good fun. It's taken like 2 years to do this thing we're doing, and it's not just a TV show about my book. My book is just a small part of this TV show. But I'm a consultant on the TV show, and it's going to be awesome. It's like this anthology show. Don't want to give too much away, but it's going to be it's really insane, the story we've got cooking.
I know what the story is, and it's a super creepy one as well.
Did I tell you?
Yeah. You've told me from ages ago when you were first working on it.
Oh, this is some Daniel LaPlante. That's part of this show we're doing. That's just 1/3 of the show we're doing. There's going to be 2 other stories in this show we're doing. That's sort of related to the LaPlante case, but kind of a little bit hidden. And these stories have never been told before. No one knows what they are. We dug.
Yeah, better not mention it, or someone will have a book out in 5 minutes. Yeah, true crime. Yes.
I do that. So yeah, we are gonna release that to the world. It's this crazy case from the same town that happened where Daniel LaPlante was from. So it's all connected into this one umbrella of insanity. It's going to be really. I read the pitch the other day, and it's so good. It's insane. I can't believe it's real. It's one of those stories that you can't believe exist. No.
Is this going to be a UK production?
No. The producer is in Hollywood, in LA. I don't know where the network are based, but I assume it's that direction. It's the Hollywood elite, those types. Sacrifice children.
I hope the writer's strike's not going to impact on anything.
I'm writing it, so I don't know. I'm not on strike.
Yeah, well, I know it's slowed down a lot of, it's pretty much brought a lot of productions to a standstill, and even in Canada, because despite a ton of things being shot in Canada, most of them are US productions, so that's sort of come to a dragging halt.
We've come full circle here, because John Cena the other day came back to wrestling for a few weeks. And it's because he's got nothing to do, because all the writers are on strike. So he's like, I've got nothing to do. I might as well go back to wrestling for a few weeks. So there you go.
How funny.
Again, John Cena is the reason why we're all here. There you go. But that was a nice little touch there.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. Well, I'm really excited. I mean, so you'll have to keep me posted. Hopefully, it'll be on something I can watch. I can say, "There's Joe."
Fine. All I want to do is get on TV. That's just my dream.
So are you actually going to be on camera?
I think so. I think I'll be one of those talking heads, with a black background, and I'll be sitting there looking all serious.
Yeah.
The other day, I had to record some voiceovers for like it's called a sizzle reel. I had to record and apparently I was a terrible actor. I can't act at all. So I'm not looking forward
it's not easy talking to a camera like that, especially if you have to read dialogue or remember dialogue. I mean, I had a couple of auditions in London for some TV things, and it was like, oh, this is horrible. I can't remember anything for 2 seconds. Give me a teleprompter.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? The producer was feeding me lines, and I had to repeat them back in my own words.
Yes.
And like I could remember like the first 3 words, and then you get in and you're like, oh crap, what did it say? And I was just messed up every single time. But
Yeah.
I got there in the end. I'm a pro.
You know, you have to admire actors who actually
Mhm.
can remember lines. I just, and like stage actors, especially, because you can't stop the performance and say, hey, man, this is it.
Yeah, how do they do it? I don't know. But hey, wrestlers do that as well. See, it's all coming around. It's all connected. You know, wrestlers have to,
It's all
they have to
connected.
remember all the lines. See, it's all there. This is all premeditated.
Oh,
I
dear.
don't know how they do it, but yeah, I had to do some voiceovers, and I can't imagine this voice being on a true crime documentary.
I hope they don't have to give you subtitles because the Yanks won't understand your. No, I've seen that. It's terrible. It's so embarrassing. Like, you know, I mean, half the time I need subtitles for the American people speaking. I'm like, what?
I thought I was speaking the Queen's English here, but apparently not.
Absolutely. Very posh. Very posh.
You've still got your British mannerisms there, then. Still got your inflection.
Well, yeah, I don't want to lose those yet. I got to come back and exercise it all again.
You know, it take a while to get rid of it, did it?
Oh, I don't know. So, do you have a approximate time? You know when this will be out?
It will be out by next September. There's a long time.
September. 2024.
2024, yeah. We started doing this in 2021, so like 3 bloody years. But apparently we'll be out by then because we want to do it for Halloween in 2024 because the story is Halloweeny, if you know what I mean. It's all very
I know.
creepy, morbid imagery. You know, Massachusetts in the 80s. It's all a bit dark, a bit grim, a bit Lovecraft, a bit vast forests and gargoyles on buildings and stuff. So it's going to be about Halloween 2024, hopefully.
Oh, that's so exciting. I'm so pleased for you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. If we need an actor, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Actually. Yeah.
Cool. Well,
thank you. In the pipeline, by the way. What
do I have in the pipeline? Oh, well, I'm just, you know, I'm trying to get my brain working, talking about this book when I'm already in the process of finishing up another true crime book. So I've got to deliver that by the 1st of October. And I'm the last one getting my work done. I haven't finished my story.
What's the next book? Oh, this is the Women.
This is not part of the series. The one I'm working on right now is called Women Who Murder, an international collection of deadly true crime tales. And it'll probably be listed for pre-orders soon because I've looked at covers and given my yay or nay on the covers, and that's being tinkered with. So, but no, I'm just scrambling because it's like the last handful of stories that I've fact-checked and edited and seeing if there's room for anything else, which I don't think there is. And I've got to get my story written and my intro and then go through everything again, look for any gremlins hiding in the manuscript, anything that's
written yet. You've got 2 weeks. Come on.
Is it 2? No, it's a little more than 2. Don't say 2. 2.5, 3, I don't know.
2.5 weeks.
Oh God, I know. Yeah, I don't know where the time has gone. It's this book's just taken so much time, and I'm like, oh man, you know. So I mean, after this, I might be, hopefully, maybe I'll be doing a bit of fiction again. We'll see. Knock wood.
I was gonna say, what are you gonna do? Because this is all I've known you do for the past 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, this true crime has just like got a stranglehold on me, so to speak. And it's just really, you know, it's so time consuming and it's such hard work and so many things that you've got to get right. I mean, you know, I try to put out something that I'm pretty confident is correct factually. You know, I don't want to put out anything riddled with errors. So, you know, that's a big responsibility.
You're good at checking facts. You cover everything.
Well, you never miss anything. As much as I can, but I mean, if something sneaks in, I mean, c'est la vie, you know.
I can't get any lies past you, and I've tried. You always catch me out, yeah.
Oh, but sometimes it's not that easy to find out these facts. I mean, especially if it's from a location that, you know, we're dealing with perhaps another language. There's not a lot of stuff that's been translated. You know, it's tricky. I mean, the story that I'm writing, which I don't want to give away what it is, I'm dealing with different dating because the country in which this crime takes place does not use the same year and calendar that we do.
Oh, right.
What? Yeah. Well, there are countries that don't use our year and our calendar, you know.
I didn't know that. China.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I'll just sell it. Okay, I'll just give you a tiny. The Middle East. They have another
Okay.
calendar. They have different years. Their year is not 2023. You know?
Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah. But sometimes when the dates are translated, they're not the right dates.
Okay. What year are they in then? What do they think they're in?
Oh, I don't know. I forgot right now. I
Are they still
forgot.
in 1998 or something? Are they still
No, I thought it's
something good?
1000 something or other. I don't know. I don't know why I'm thinking it's 1064. I have no idea why that number is sticking in my head. But no, so it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. And then translating things and sometimes like they'll be saying he did this and he did that. It translates as he, but it isn't he, it's she. And it's like you're
Oh,
trying to
wow.
decipher all this stuff, you know?
You chose a difficult subject matter there.
I did, but I also got really lucky because I got some interviews with some people in this country, which is,
Nice.
you know, it's not necessarily a country we're really palsy with these days.
Yeah.
And I got some really nice quotes that I'm going to be putting in the book
Oh,
and
great.
in the
Well,
story. So
excellent stuff. That sounds
yeah,
great. I can't wait to read that. Sounds good.
thank you,
I love
thank
the
you. I'm
obscure.
sorry you're not in this one. You're not in this one. I feel bad now, but
I will stick at 4. 4 is a good amount.
yeah, that's pretty good. That's good.
4 out of, I mean, Eden, 9
There's 7 books.
or 7. Oh, that's over
In this
50%.
in the best new true crime stories, it's
So
7. So yeah,
69% will say that's good. I mean,
that's
69%.
pretty good. But I think you've been beaten by Mr. Ferguson down in Oz.
Oh, that guy. Always
That
seems like
guy,
he's always in the front. Always
Ferg
seems
is always there. He's
who's that one from the famous podcast? Is it who's the podcaster? Because I know him.
uh,
He's
you
in my
mean
spit.
Mike Brown?
Is it Mike Brown? Is he in
Well,
this
Mike
one?
Brown was in Serial Killers, and he's actually going to be in my next book, the Women Who Murder book. He's in there, but
Is
he's
he?
only been in one of my books,
What's the podcast he does?
Dark Poutine.
That's the one. Oh, I thought he was in more than one. Sorry, I thought I
No,
saw
he's
him.
only been in the Serial Killers, but he's going to be in Women Who Murder. So.
Ah, I see him all the time because I used to work for a podcast that was on Wondery, and he's also on Wondery, so I see his name all the time.
Yeah. His podcast's very popular, so
Yeah,
it's a good podcast.
Yes, yeah, I've heard it's great. Okay,
Yeah.
damn you, Ferguson. Damn you.
Fatberg, yeah. Oh well, you'll have a bone to pick with him if you go down to Perth.
Damn it. Oh, I was going to say something now. Okay. No, his stories are good though. I like them. I've read them all.
Yeah.
Well.
I know I do have some people that appear in book after book, but I mean, they give me what I want, you know, and
We do.
you do. You give me what I want.
I'll take the silver medal this time. Thank you.
Oh, well, listen, thanks so much for coming on. I have been chatting with Mr. Joe Turner from the Best New True Crime Stories, Crimes of Famous and Infamous Criminals. His story is called Wrestling with Demons, which we've been chatting about featuring Chris Benoit and a terrible tragedy. So thanks again for coming on. I'm so excited for your upcoming exciting TV and tie-in and all that. I think it's really cool.
It's going to be awesome. I'll let you know when it's out.
Yeah, definitely.
Good luck with the next book.
Thank you.
No,
bye.
Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.